All right, you are rocking and rolling,
I'm
Senator.
rocking and rolling. All right, here we go.
All right, coming to bring the final keynote to our third annual Hack the Capitol. We have Senator Mike Rounds, the senator from South Dakota on the Armed Services Committee, and more importantly, on the subcommittee chairman for cybersecurity, which is quite relevant to what we have been talking about all day across multiple tracks of different panels and speakers across multiple topics. There will be a live Q&A session as a part of this, so please post your questions in the chat app. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, hey, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to visit with you a little bit. I'm going to preface this by saying that I recognize that I'm in basically the third grade when it comes to these activities, and I'm talking to people that have master's degrees and doctoral degrees with regard to the issues at hand. But somebody needed to participate as the chairman on the cyber committee, and when all of the senior members said not me, that meant that I got to do it. But actually, it's been a fascinating educational opportunity for me, and I can share with you that we have, in my opinion, made some significant strides with regard to what we have done within the Department of Defense and what we plan on doing with the National Defense Authorization Act, and specifically some real heavy activity in the cyber realm. Look, it wasn't that long ago when we talked about war, we talked about air, land, and sea battles. That changed with the advent of space. And now with cyberspace, we've entered an entirely new area in which, while we have spent literally billions and billions of dollars per year on creating platforms that protect our country, our near-peer adversaries and some of our other adversaries around the world have taken shortcuts. And what they have done is recognize that we have the ability to control, in many cases, the observation through space, through our satellites and so forth. But we also have the ability, using our cyber operations, to communicate very, very rapidly and to determine what it is we're doing more rapidly than our competitors can do. They've also discovered that it's less expensive to try to negate our platforms, our weapon systems, using cyber, which connects everything we've got. And so we find ourselves at risk, not just with our near-peer competitors of Russia and China, but also with regards to North Korea and Iran specifically. And so, as we talk about this stuff, these are serious areas in which our competitors are spending money, but compared to the shortcuts they're taking, they found a very inexpensive way to attempt to limit our capabilities, to be able to see what's going on, to communicate what's going on, and to be able to utilize our weapon systems, all of which have a cyber component one way or the other. So this has become one of those things, we talked about it. The question really for many of us was, so where do we have the expertise and how does this cyber stuff fit into everything else? And what we're finding is that it is everywhere, and that it is not a case of where you can separate it out and create this new silo and just call it cyber, and then you're all okay because you let your cyber experts get together and work on stuff and your space experts work on stuff. Every place where we have platforms, every place where we communicate within the DOD, within the defense network, within our Homeland Security networks, within the whole of government, and really within our business communities, cyber's every place. And so what we've tried to do is to look, first of all, within the Department of Defense, because that's our specific role, but then also, how does it go outside of the Department of Defense and communicate with Homeland Security, other agencies of government, but also with the business community and Americans in general. Just to give you an example, I think most Americans would suspect that if there was ever a time in which our power supply or our water supply, our transportation systems, our financial institution systems, if any of those were hacked, they would expect that our Department of Defense would somehow be directly involved in protecting them. And yet that becomes Homeland Security's role. And we can step in, but Department of Defense works outside of the United States, not inside the United States. if we have, just in a simple way, if we have bombers from another nation coming in, we recognize our Department of Defense's role to stop them before they get here. If we have incoming missiles coming in, we recognize our Department of Defense's role to stop them. But this cyber activity is insidious. It's there already. And to try to find the archers, the bad actors that are out there that are sending these, for lack of a better term, these arrows through cyberspace to create problems or to perhaps steal or to manipulate our systems, that creates not only legal challenges, but it creates real complications to try to find out where that arrow is actually being shot from and which platform outside of our American system is actually responsible for creating the original attack mode in the first place. And so these have all been areas that number one, we had to have attorneys working with us to determine what was appropriate, how we could respond. And then second of all, to have the technologies to be able to stop those arrows before they ever get here in the first place. And finally, to have the ability for those arrows that do get through to detect them as quickly as possible, isolate them in a moment's notice, take them out of systems that are here, and figure out where they came from and protect and create a stronger shell the next time around. It's one of the reasons why right now we have within the Department of Defense, we have directed that now we want time sensitive and specifications for activity within the Department of Defense to start determining, like we do in the private sector, time sensitive responses. And we want to be able to measure that. But in the DoDN, within the Department of Defense's internet connectivity, we've had lots of different platforms and lots of different categories of defenses that have built up over years. And they got to be able to talk to one another, but they don't all talk to one another. So when you've got systems analysts and systems coordinators coming in asking for help, you've got to have people that have the tools that work on all of these different systems. Or you've got to have a shell that protects all of them, which becomes even more complicated. So we find ourselves in the very early stages, in my opinion, of being able to have comprehensive networks to protect or capabilities to protect all of our Department of Defense networks. And then you've still got to have your contractors who work on a day-to-day basis with those networks to be protected. And when there's communications back and forth, you've got to be able to protect the communications and to find out if they're being intercepted or manipulated by outside bad guys, all of which takes time and takes an incredible amount of expertise. So I know I'm talking to folks that probably look at this thing, oh, we've heard all this before. But I guess what I wanted to share with you is just how complicated we're finding it. And with the DoDN as large as it is, we're finding that it's taking a huge amount of manpower and a huge amount of brain power on their part to actually work through all of these issues to try to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. I'll also say this, I have been honored to be able to work and to learn from some very, very bright and dedicated people within the Department of Defense who work every single day to keep the department safe and to recognize that their overall role is to protect our country. Our role in Congress, I believe, first of all, is to make appropriate public policy that promotes and helps to assist in the protection of the DoD network, as well as the protection of our country as a whole from cyber attack. But second of all, it's also to make sure that we appropriately provide the resources so that we're ahead of the game, both of which are critical. And we're talking money now. And so I see us as having a role in both places. Let me just for a second talk, just as an example, what public policy means in this case. For a while, during the Obama administration, they had, in good faith, I might add, attempted to put together the appropriate strategies for doing offensive cyber operations around the world. But they ran into two issues. First of all, many of our legal folks said that we needed to have public policy that allowed us to have cyber activity outside of an identified war zone. And so we had to come back in and make good public policy that allowed us to do cyber operations and say that our laws allowed that would be considered traditional military activity, even if it was outside of an established war zone. We've done that. That was good public policy on our part. But second of all, it required that there be a coordinated effort to make sure that all of the different entities of government didn't trip over themselves when it came to identifying when a cyber operation was going to be offensively begun within the Department of Defense. And the Obama administration attempted to answer the coordinated effect by having a consensual arrangement among all of the different departments under what they called PPD 20, Presidential Policy Directive 20. During that 5-year period in which it was in effect, we never successfully did one single cyber operation, offensive cyber operation. So under new administration and after learning what their experience had been, our subcommittee proposed and had a discussion with folks in the White House. And I might add, they, over a period of 6 months, developed a replacement for PPD 20 with a classified product called NSPM 13, National Security Policy Memorandum 13, which laid out a streamlined approach to allow for cyber operations to take place, laying clear identification of a process that could not be stopped by one entity, but would recognize the concerns of different entities within government should a cyber operation be proposed, but to do it on a very expedited basis. This has been working for us. And the best example I can give you is that it has been well established that in 2016, we did have Russian actors manipulating public attention to the election by influencing public thought. And they did it by manipulating and using bots to bring to the attention in social media only half information or entirely misinformation. And they tried to get different groups, the left and the right, who were sensitive to very emotional issues, to think that it was other Americans fighting back and forth. And in doing so, they manipulated the way that the election was working. We challenged that in 2018. And all I can really say right now, because most of it, there's been some release publicly by the Department of Defense. But let me put it this way. It is not by accident that Russia was not able to manipulate the 2018 election cycle. And they clearly understood that we had cyber capabilities that could most certainly impact their ability to use cyber and to manipulate our election process. And they're not going to give up. They're going to be back in. They're going to try to do the same kind of stuff again. They're going to be smarter at it. We've got to be smarter at it, and I think we are. But we've got good capabilities, and they're going to get better all the time. But we've got to have the expertise. We've got to have the brain power, and we've got to recognize one more thing, and that is that the technology is the key long term. It's not just quantitative, but it's machine learning, and it's artificial intelligence that we're going to have to use in stopping the bad guys that are out there, and in staying one step ahead of them and protecting our assets here. So with that, I'm hoping to just prime the pump, but from a guy that's just hoping to graduate out of the 3rd grade, I hope I've at least given some of you folks in that collegiate era an opportunity to maybe come back and offer advice, thoughts, or perhaps some questions that I can muff up.
We're sure you're going to do a great job here. So the first question ties into the comment around machine learning. Typically in the past that we have as a country been more in favor of a free market approach, but it seems like that's started to shift now where we have recommendations on specific technical investments that we need to make to ensure that we are secure as a nation. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
There's an interesting concept out there that used to be that when we did platforms, we would go in and negotiate and buy and have a really technically complicated approach to buying assets. We'd buy platforms and we would buy systems, but it would take years to develop. We are recognizing that if we want to stay ahead of the curve, we can't do that anymore, and we have to have private enterprise actively involved. We've got to find a way when it comes to the acquisition of the products that we need. We have to have private enterprise actively involved. If you take a look at what's happened in cyber within the DoD versus outside the DoD, my personal opinion is that outside the DoD, because private enterprise has been allowed to grow, expand, and push, we need to have that spirit of entrepreneurial idea making and the ability to come in with ideas and to show them to be able to work and then to be able to get paid to incorporate them into a DoD process. We can't sit down and use the old processes that were kind of a series of checks and balances when it comes to new acquisitions anymore. We're going to make some mistakes in our acquisition processes, but we're going to have to be a lot more quick on our feet, and we're going to have to rely on outside expertise to participate and to continue to bring us new ideas that we might be able to incorporate. The other side of this, though, is internally, we need a huge number of individuals that want to participate within government in helping to create not only the strongest defenses, but also the strongest offensive capabilities that we possibly can. There's bright young people out there that would love to, I think, not only be involved on a day-to-day basis with cutting edge, but very exciting activities on a worldwide basis, but they'd also like to participate within the private sector as well. And we need them to be able to do both. Right now, for every 3 positions that are offered in the private sector, we're filling 1. And so there's a huge demand out there for cyber capabilities. It's one of the reasons why we absolutely need to be able to do more of the operations using machine learning and artificial intelligence. We'll never catch up unless we incorporate that into the DoD and into Homeland Security, the whole of government. And I think private business is already recognizing that and moving in that direction. We need to learn from that. And I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job of answering your question or not, but we absolutely have to incorporate those individuals who understand artificial intelligence, and they have got to be able to help us put together and to get past the point of hiring literally thousands and thousands of individuals who otherwise we'll never get. We need the artificial intelligence in order to do the job of looking at all of the different areas where we could be attacked from outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Mike, in fact, what I would say is that the fact that the answer wasn't a simple no to start already highlights a significant shift in the way that we're starting to talk and look at policy in that regard. So another question here, although education is largely dictated at the state level, do you find that it's useful to contemplate a national push on misinformation education?
Yeah, and in fact, you know, I actually had a reporter ask me about that today in the hall, and I told him, I said, you know, it's one thing to have government trying to share with people what's going on out there, but that actually almost creates an additional mistrust in government as to whether or not we're telling the whole story or not, or whether it's Republicans telling it or Democrats telling it. I can share with you, we are trying to get that level of trust put together so that when people are being manipulated, or when the Russians or the Chinese or the Iranians are trying to manipulate different parts, because they all have different purposes, they all have different interests in manipulating it. But what we're trying to share is that in each particular case, if we can just let Americans understand that folks on the outside really are trying to pit us against one another, and they're trying to limit our trust in the ability for us to have free and fair elections. They're trying to do that, to manipulate it, because they want us to be in that position of not trusting that our leaders were elected fairly. They want that mistrust out there. And what I've told folks is the social media platforms that are out there, in many cases, there's actually a greater trust factor there than what there is sometimes if government says something. And that's not necessarily a good position to be in, but I think we have to recognize that we need lots of different entities out there sharing a common message of just how manipulative some of our adversaries are. And these are near peer adversaries that are very, very good at what they're doing. And they spend a huge amount of time trying to figure out ways to get in and to facilitate the influence of American voters. And they're getting very, very good at manipulating very small groups, but literally thousands of different groups across the United States. They want to sow those seeds of misbelief and mistrust within our government. So we've got a role to play here as elected officials to try to send some sense of stability and some sense of common sense that we portray when it comes to recognizing that mistrust is trying to be sown out there. And as much information as we can get out to the public to share who is doing it, why they're doing it, and what they're up to, the better off we're going to be. But we're going to need the help of the private sector to also say, hey, we don't have a dog in this fight, but we're going to tell you what we're seeing on our platforms and where the bots are located, where the misinformation is, and what the groups are that they're trying to do. And if we can't coordinate that somehow to let people know how important that is, then we really do have a problem. Because I think that people feel in many cases that, a huge amount of their information comes, it used to be, I remember folks would say, well, it was on TV, so it must be true. And now we're saying, well, it's on the internet, so it must be true. And we've got to get folks to get to the point to say, time out, check the sources, double check the sources, find out whether you have a trustworthy source that is sharing that information that is accountable to you. And, folks have really kind of went to, if they're on the left side, they go to the left-leaning side of the media. And if they're on the right side, they go to the right-leaning side of the media. We need some more of the media out there that actually does commit and do their best to try to ride the just the facts, please message that's out there. And it'd be great to have that within some of the social media sites as well. And that's something that I think will come as the demand for it is there. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, but I'm thinking that's kind of where you're going with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, we had a panel today comprised of journalists that covered different elements of critical infrastructure, specifically so we could talk about the press perspective, because I think that is a key insight to them being the megaphone of fact and analysis to what's happening.
Yeah, look, I don't think that the press is big, bad, and intentionally doing it in most cases. I really don't. I think the vast majority of the reporters that we talk to here, they honestly believe that they're trying to get really good data, but they're also subject to, and they can be manipulated as well. And they're reading a lot of the same stuff that everybody else is on, on social media platforms and so forth. And social media platforms it looks like there's a huge number of people following or being involved in discussions, but a lot of it can just be bots that are being manipulated by folks overseas with the intent of sowing mistrust. And what I tell, the reporters up here, it's critical that we do our best to try to share, even if it's boring to do it. It's really important that we try to share as much of a story and get into the weeds as much as we can to try to share kind of the rest of the story when possible. But sometimes that's hard to do in a social media setting.
So I think this might be the final question that we have time for. And it's building off of where we were talking about what the private sector's been doing. And the question is, how do we better bridge the gaps of private-public partnerships, especially in the smaller industrial enterprises that may support critical portions of our food, energy, and other aspects of our nation's core functions? Many parts of our country, and this ties to the news and press aspect, still don't see the relevance of the attacks that have happened in foreign countries and how that may also be a threat stateside.
Man, you hit it on the head. And I have to share with you now, you're getting out of an area that I have a role to play in under the Department of Defense. This really goes into the Homeland Security side of things, but we coordinate with them in many cases to try to share the message of what we're finding outside. Look, there's within the larger organizations, financial institutions, your infrastructure folks, whether it's power, roads, bridges, water, so forth, electricity, those folks get it because they're being attacked, thousands and thousands of times per hour with people trying to find the sensitivities going in. The challenge we've got is providing expertise to smaller places that just don't, they can't afford to have, a high paid full-time person on board. But what we can do is provide additional protection through entities that have made it as a contractor their business to be able to assist and to a one-size-fits-all type of a deal to come in and to help protect the cyber systems that a small business might need. But this is going to be an ongoing challenge. In South Dakota, we've got Dakota State University, small university, Madison, South Dakota. They're turning out about 400 cyber experts a year. Today, they have jobs before they get to their, through their third year in a 4-year degree. And a lot of them are going to the financial institutions, but now more and more we're going into NSA activities, DOD activities, and so forth. But what I'd like to do is see a lot of the expertise that they pick up be made available for them to go back into private enterprise and then to stay involved with government through either a National Guard connection, an Army Reserve connection, an Air Force Reserve connection, so they can still come in and be a cyber warrior and help us, but carry that expertise back into the private sector where every single day they're learning more in the private sector, they're communicating with other folks in the private sector, but that provides a benefit to the private sector as well to offer those services to small businesses that can't afford to have a full-time person on staff, but could very well go into one of these really top-notch cybersecurity contractors that work with DOD, work with Homeland Security, but could also offer the plug-and-play software and the patches to go with it on literally an ongoing basis to small business as well. We can't have contractors working with DOD that don't have cybersecurity as an utmost part of their job. China has stolen over $600 billion in intellectual properties a year from the United States. A significant part of that has been through cyber activities where they've gone into defense contractors and stolen stuff out. They're very, very good at what they do, very good. We got to be better. And I'm convinced in the United States and our allies, we can be, we want to be, but it takes seminars like this, it takes discussions like this to number one, let you know that the demand is going to be there. It's going to do nothing except go up. And for individuals that have this capability, please, don't be afraid to stay on top of it at the cutting edge. And your services are going to be in demand during your entire professional career.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your remarks as well as your willingness to engage in the question and answer session.
Appreciate the opportunity. And look, for folks that are out there, you play a huge role if you're involved in Homeland Security issues, DOD issues, or for that matter, helping private businesses to protect their assets. You play an important role. Stick with it, and please be assured, those of us that don't have the expertise that you have, we really do appreciate what you do and what you bring to the fight. We cannot protect our nation long term unless we have the expertise that you offer, and we have to incorporate it in everything we do. It is truly the Internet of Things.
Thank you for your time today, Senator.
You bet.